Y'all thought we was playing? Y'all thought this was for play, huh? Nah, this is serious business. Now, ladies and gentlemen, with no further ado,
For believers, they're spitting truth up in the stew.
Okay.
Each with different flavors, you can savor, you can chew. Talking life, love, and Christ, just to name a few. Grab a seat at the table, we got a bowl that's just for you.
Okay.
Trey, stay whipping up the work in the kitchen. And Whit, we can't keep up with the heat that she be dishing. And height, he had the sight, he was blessed with the vision. And me, I'm in the back, I'll be handling the dishes. I hope you don't mind if I speed it up. Stay at the beat as I beat it up. Serving it cold, you can heat it up. The food is good, you should eat it up. Thank the Lord for redeeming us, for the four of us teaming up. Lifestyle was dirty, he cleaned it up. Gave us a voice, now we speaking up.
told y'all. And that's light work. I had to contain him. Do. What's up, y'all?
Hello.
Welcome back. This is the Last Supper podcast. We missed you, but we're back with another episode. We're back to full strength. Got the squad here. My
Shout
family.
out to Witt's return.
Yes, we missed you as usual.
Miss y'all.
Fred?
I think I had a good episode though.
We did. What's up, Fred? FK Studio still standing strong, still supporting already. Squad.
Hello. That's all I'm gonna say the whole episode. Hello.
Yo,
Hello.
How was the weekend? How we been? As you drink your water.
My weekend started off very interesting.
Yeah.
As Chris is aware, I told Whitney earlier. Yesterday, Chris and I decided to go for a jog. You know, as he said in the video,
Yeah.
we're gonna work on our health. It was on Instagram, and as we were jogging, enjoying ourselves, we saw a couple of European descent, and so we said hello, how's it going, and good morning. And the woman, she spoke, but the gentleman didn't say anything.
It's fine.
Next thing we know, there was a beer can thrown at us.
Yeah.
Um,
What time was it?
it was about 8:30 in the morning with a beer can.
What time they start selling beer and wine?
I couldn't tell you. I've
I
never
could
asked
tell
that
you.
question.
I could tell you. It's like 9 or 10.
9 or 10?
9 at the earliest, 10 at the
He
earliest.
got the
yeah.
hookup.
Yeah, he knows somebody.
But yeah, he threw it at us, and me and Chris kind of, we were a little shocked, a lot shocked. And
To say the least.
Yeah, we didn't, and we
Quick test of patience.
Short story, well, long story short, we just kind of let it pass, let it brush, go over our back. I had to, calm down Chris, and because it could have got to a different place, a whole nother level, and we didn't allow it to do that. We kept going, and the man stared at us the whole time, like eyeing us down, like he wanted beef. He wanted all the smoke.
Like he couldn't get this smoke.
He wanted all the smoke, and so we just moved on with our life, let him have his.
Sign of the times, unfortunately.
Hate is real in 2020. Hate is real.
The hate is real in the
And
streets.
you can see it in 2020.
Yep, but that was our day. That was our Saturday. I think you had a calmer Saturday. How was yours?
I had a good Saturday. My baby sister came into town, so I
Shout out
got
to
to,
Shout out
baby
to baby
got to
sis.
spend the day with her. So that was good. She was over yesterday. She came into town for her boyfriend's birthday. So that was pretty much it, though. Other than that, I've just been cleaning, packing, chilling.
Tell the people about your dream. That was funny. Tell the people about
y'all,
your dream.
The Lord. I'm telling you, he was speaking to me. I just don't know what he was saying. So I had a dream that they were rioting where I was at. So I was outside on the streets, of course, and it was a riot, y'all. Like it was a for real. When we talking about like bottles, like flaming bottles being thrown and everything.
Oh.
And so we found a storefront that we could hide in. And so it had been boarded up, it looked like, but maybe some of the boards had fallen. So we were behind the
Who was
boards.
we? Let me ask that. Who's
I don't
we?
know. I was with people. But I
Just
don't know who
random
people were.
people hiding in the storefront.
You know how it go when you're out there. But yeah, so I was like looking through the things, and as I'm looking through the board, I see that there's a decorative plant. I'm pretty sure it was a fig tree. It was in the middle of the street, like it was brand new, y'all. It had the tag on it.
It's a
I
trap.
could
That's
see
what
the
it
tag.
was.
I felt like it was a trap, but I obviously I felt like I could do it. So I tried to run out and grab it, and as soon as I grabbed it, I woke up. So
Wow, you know what I
that's
see
the
in
dream.
that?
I woke up so happy though. I was just trying to go back to sleep.
I see the spirit revealing your true desire behind these protests is to loot for home
decorative
improvement
House
items
decor.
and decorative things. And we have to call
Hey, the
that
Lord
spirit out
reach
of
your heart,
you.
you know.
If you
This
see
is not what it's
Whitney
about.
approaching your target, please be on alert.
She's
I am a
stolen
proud
20 pillows
patriot.
across the city.
We gotta let y'all
Yes.
throw pillow bandit, take it
Yeah.
out.
Come on now. She's dressed in Black Lives Matter.
Hydra cutlery.
All I want to say is to my less melanated sister that I saw carrying the lamps out of Target, I feel you. I feel you.
Hey,
Even though we love Target,
demand.
Target, we had to be you. But listen, we trying to take a stand for something.
Hey, you shouldn't have such good stuff. Trey, my brother.
I mean, I had a very long day yesterday, but it was cool.
You want to talk about it?
Was it more than 24 hours?
I got up at 7, and I went to bed at 3.
So no.
So no.
No.
Close though.
Close. Still
Very
within that 24-hour frame.
Very close.
Got you.
But no, I had a meeting at 8. Then we handed out food boxes. The nonprofit I work for from about 10 to about 4, and then one of my friends had a birthday kickback,
Hey,
and that was from like 10 until like 2. So
nice. Shout out to my boy too.
it was cool.
Yeah, my boy had a birthday kickback last night too. My boy Josh, about to turn 29. Shout out to my boy. Came up with me like a brother.
What's up,
Happy
Josh?
birthday,
You know what I'm
friends.
saying? And shout out to Ricky. He had a birthday not too long ago too. He had
Rick
a food,
Ology.
not a
Big
food
Rick.
drive, but a what would you call that? Like a care
Field
package drive?
An essential drive.
Yeah, an essential drive. We put together care packages of essentials for people in homeless shelters. And, you know, people don't really spend their birthday doing stuff like that, putting together care packages for people they don't know, you know, who are less fortunate. But that's the kind of people we roll with, fortunately. So we got to do something cool like that on a Saturday morning. So, yeah, shout out to my brothers out here getting older, getting wiser, though. Man. Well, we came in on a song. Wait, before we get that, shout out to before we get into the reason for the intro song, shout out to New South Wales. We picked up another country. Hey, y'all know somebody in New South Wales, by the way?
I do.
Yeah?
No.
Okay.
A
Well,
friend of mine named Reggie.
Reggie in New South Wales. Thank you for tuning in. Shout out. We like to shout out every new country we get once we pick you up. So appreciate y'all tuning in. Hope you continue to.
Yes.
Now, to the topic at hand. We came in on old school Beyonce, not Beyonce, I'm sorry.
No, you said it right.
Disrespectful.
You said it right.
I'm not going to get into what you actually call
Jarrell, you're disrespectful.
No, I'm not going to say that, but you said
No, Destiny's Child song, Pay My Bills. We chose that because it was it was appropriate for this topic that we're talking about, which cinches, it does.
He did this. Y'all heard this song?
Oh, Lil Baby? Yeah. You know what? Time out. Shout
Time
out to
out.
Lil
Time
Baby.
out to Lil Baby.
Let's shout out to Lil Baby
Yes.
out here.
Can I just
making
say,
a difference
I
with
thought
his
the
lyrics.
song was decent.
I mean,
I want to tell y'all why I love this song. I love this
Speak
song
on it.
because
Tell me
because
about
I
it.
love Lil Baby, and I love Lil Baby because you can tell that he survived the environment that he was in, but you can tell that he's a thinker, right? Like you can tell that
True.
he's a very smart guy. That you can tell he's sharp. You can tell he's a leader, right? And so in this song, to be able to hear, I just thought it was beautiful because you can hear how God gives everybody a voice. In
What's the
different
name of the
ways.
song?
It's called The Bigger Picture.
Okay.
Yeah, it's called The Bigger Picture. But I kept saying like, the emotion in the song was so raw. Like the things that he was saying was like, you can tell these are his genuine thoughts, right? And I can just imagine how many times he's been sat down in front of cameras or like on an interview or somebody said, oh, well, tell me what you think about this. And he was just like, I mean, it sucks. So, you know, whatever. But when you get into your element and your purpose, like it just shows how like everybody has, you know what I mean? Like
gift.
A voice.
gift. Yeah. And it's just beautiful to hear him express his pain through that music, you know, and to see the video, like I love it. Everybody go check it
I'm
out.
going to check it out. I haven't
Yeah,
heard
go
it
check
yet.
it
Yeah,
out.
please do. I encourage you to.
Yeah.
And I'll be the first to say I don't really have much for a lot of the new rappers, the new generation of rappers, because I really don't think that they talk about much. Lil Baby is one of the few that I like. I have an ear for. You know, I listen when he drops new stuff because for one, like we said, he has a genuine nature about his music and the way he raps. I can tell he's not some creation in a studio by some A&Rs and music execs. You know, he's somebody who really survived these environments he's rapping about. And he's somebody that you can tell he raps about nonsense just like all of them do. But he also realizes that there's another side that he doesn't ignore that a lot of them do. And this song is speaking to that, the injustices. And, you know, he's setting himself up to be somebody who just isn't some trap rapper, you know, and I can respect that. So Shout out to Lil Baby, man.
Shout out to Lil Baby.
And
And
the
I-
bigger picture.
Yeah, and real quick. It's just important that all black people find a way to be able to express their emotions, but especially black men. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, y'all have to find ways to be able to take everything that you feel and to put it out. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just think that's a huge, huge stumbling block for men in general, but especially black men. But I just love seeing that. I love how he can take that and find a way to
True.
use his art to put it the way he feels
True,
out there. So.
true. We encourage everybody to use their voice, their skills, their art to express themselves, especially if it's to highlight injustice. This Black Lives Matter movement, now that it's global, finally, after years of us screaming it and, people ignoring it, it's really having this moment in the sun. And I'm seeing changes that I never thought I would witness, like media companies trying to intentionally slice the word urban from describing things, and just like there's extra attention and details being placed into how we're being viewed, how we're being portrayed. And I mean, honestly, we can, at this point, I feel like we can literally transform this platform to be like a Black Lives Matter type podcast just because of everything that's going on. I'm not saying that that's what we're going to do. I don't think I would do that, but it's something that it's a consistent theme on our latest episodes because it really is infiltrating every aspect of our life, from business, art, music, even spiritually. Like we're having a moment. And
I've seen a lot of separation between reality TV stars and certain networks. Like there have been a lot of people that have been let go from MTV because of statements that they've made either in social media or that they've just said out loud. And MTV has separated themselves and not airing them or inviting them back to other shows anymore. And I thought that was pretty interesting because you don't see that a lot.
No.
But one thing that does bother me in a sense is some of these things happened years ago and these people were still affiliated with your shows. Why did you wait
I'm
until
so glad you-
now
I'm so
to do
glad you
something like
said it.
because the statements had just as much, if not more, impact back then in comparison to now.
True. Starbucks, one of my favorite examples right now. Everybody was slapping them on the butt for their sensitivity training they were doing. Like, good job, That's how you show that you care from corporate, And I'm not even a coffee drinker, So I was never personally conflicted by it. I don't have to buy Starbucks. I don't buy Starbucks already. But I looked at the sensitivity training and I was like, that is definitely forward-facing, like appeasing type tactic. Like, yeah, you pull your employees in for a day, you give them training, and then you send them back out there. Like, no real change happened, no real cultural change happened. And I can tell because now you fast forward a few years later, they're out corporately supporting us, but then telling their members don't wear BLM paraphernalia, don't wear their merchandise, which isn't consistent with what you see them do with the LGBTQ community, So there's a lot of fake activism going on out here. So I said 5 years ago, there's going to be a lot of people that wake up on the wrong side of history, like one day. I didn't expect to see that day or like really experience it to the point we're experiencing it now. But yeah, the NFL was the biggest one in my mind, the biggest culprit of like, how are y'all getting this so wrong on a national scale?
I agree with that. I think, because I've been saying, like, even in terms of, like, from a cultural standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint, from a personal standpoint, like, I just really feel like the season that we're in is, like, you have to choose a side. Like, right, when things start to reach, boiling points where they are now, like, right, we have this boiling point with the pandemic and then racism at an all-time high, and then you got the hospitals threatening to overflow. People are out and they shouldn't really be out. Like, everything's at a boiling point in so many different areas, right? And like, you almost got to choose a side. And I think a lot of these companies are seeing like, okay, the middle line, and the people on the front lines are saying, ain't no more
Middle ground.
middle ground. You know what I'm saying? You have to choose a side.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're either with us or you're against us, and then it's like your silence speaks speaks volumes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so I look at the NFL. You just said something about the NFL, and I'm like, look at the ownership. Like if you look at the ownership and who owns NFL teams, a lot of just older white men, or a lot of older conglomerates of groups coming together to own these teams. There's no voice of reason. There's nobody of color in those arenas that's going to speak up for us to say, look, we're wrong. And because of that, they're feeling like they're right and they feel entitled, like what they're doing. And they're saying what black people are doing right now in regards to protesting that it's wrong. And that was a statement that I saw yesterday. I'm not sure if it was on Whitney's on something she posted in her story, but it said something to the effect, protesting racism in America is counted as protesting America.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that's such a powerful statement, because it's almost like America supports racism as long as it's against us.
America is racism.
It is racism.
Racism is rooted, literally intertwined into the roots of the deepest
Definitely.
parts of America. You know what I mean? Like,
Definitely.
racism is America. So to protest racism, to demand equality across the board, quite literally is anti-American.
The foundation of America is
Yeah.
racism and tyranny and abuse and disassociation with certain groups and ethnicities and people. and we, and not only us, but even Native Americans, we're the foundation of this country. But yet we have nothing to stand on ourselves because they took everything from us.
Well, nice
Sorry,
intro, guys.
sorry.
So back to the dinner thieves.
Right. The dinner thieves. Let's take this
Shout
on a
out
more
to 50
positive
Cent.
turn.
Shout out to 50 Cent, Dinner Thieves.
On a more positive note, right? Let's
It's-
talk about
it's
church
positive.
fraud.
It's positive.
I'm not even gonna say that what we were talking about is negative.
No,
It's
just
shining
reality.
the light. It's the reality.
Can
the
I,
reality.
can I say something?
Please do.
I have to use the restroom.
Go ahead, bro. Man. I mean,
You should
you know,
have did that while you were sitting there. Why were you
I wasn't. I was like, maybe if I concentrate on not having
That-
to use the restroom, it'll go away.
do what you got to do.
It did it. Yeah, I'll be back.
All right. So the real topic at hand is spiritual abuse and, more specifically, misappropriation of church resources, right? And the effects that has on the people that do it, on the people that are looking up to those people, that are following those people, these organizations that are affiliated, and just the body of Christ as a whole, and why that could be such a detrimental thing for us. If you've been following any news in the spiritual community at all, you may be aware of a certain situation that's, been unfolding between Heather and Cornelius Lindsay, two Christian influencers with a massive platform and, social media following that have done a lot of good things and done a lot of great work in ministry and in just spreading the word. But unfortunately, details have surfaced about potential misappropriation of funds and commingling of resources between organizations that typically should be split and, basically carrying on the business of the church in an honorable way.
I feel so much better, guys.
I appreciate. Yeah, I'm glad you do. I'm glad you do, Trey.
Dragon tea?
It was like a pressure fight. It was just bad, bro. That's because this is my second cup of coffee today.
I feel it. So
It's not Starbucks though. It's Folgers.
So, yeah, like I was saying, there was a video that surfaced. It's about an hour on YouTube, put out by a gentleman by the name of, what was his name? Tayshawn and Ayana. That's,
Well, what
Yeah.
video?
The
article.
investigation is being led by Ayana Mathis.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ayana Mathis.
She
and
wrote an open letter.
Yeah, Tayshawn and his wife were former leaders, I guess, within the Gathering Oasis Church.
Yes.
And employees as well.
True. And in this video, Tayshawn details just exchanges between him and Cornelius and him and Heather regarding invoices and charges to a Amex card that belongs to Heather, which has charges that relate to her individual ministry, which would be the Pinky Promise, the Pinky Swear, something, the Pinky Swear,
Pinky
Promise.
Square.
Pinky
You said it
Promise.
right the first time.
The Pinky Promise.
Come on.
and the Gathering Church, the Gathering Oasis Church, which typically should not be, commingled on one business card. And he details, how he corresponded with Heather and Cornelius trying to get understanding of why, business charges are being mixed with church charges. Even details about them selling a Range Rover to the church for $10,000 for their guest speakers when apparently the church doesn't have guest speakers. So, just even selling the car to the church, that's in itself is a very questionable and shady, business move, I would say. And then they go on to write an open letter going into further detail of just some even more specific abuses done to people who were affiliated with the church that are no longer there, in everything from shaming, controlling the narrative for incoming employees, not paying people based off of disagreements, all kinds of what we would call spiritual abuse, you know. And I just kind of wanted to dive into that as a whole, you know, not just focus on Heather and Cornelius. They're just really examples of what we're talking about. But, you know, different examples that we've seen maybe in our lives, whether we've experienced it, heard about it, saw it, of different spiritual abuses, whether they be physical, financial, mental, emotional, things that we've seen play out in churches or organizations, and how that affected us and our ability to be a part of it. Anybody want to start off on this?
I know before we started, we had an example that she brought up. Yeah, I put her out there like
On the spot.
On the spot. It don't matter. I can jump it off too.
She was like,
I remember when I was a kid,
On the spot.
and it's weird. Sometimes you look back and you see things that you never paid attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a kid, I used to go to this church, and used to love this church when I was a kid. Loved the pastor, loved his preaching style, loved everything about it. And when I got older, I found out that the pastor was sexually abusing some of the kids at the church.
Really?
And it never happened to me. I was already out of the church. I was living in a whole nother state. And so when I found that out, like, it really shocked me, you know, because it's like, this is someone that I looked up to, someone that I looked forward to hearing him preach the word as a child. And it's like, man, like, it broke my heart. Like, man, how could you use your position to do this to these children? And so that was one thing that I saw. And then also, more recently, Chris is funny. More recently, a young lady that goes to live with us. I won't put her name out there or anything like that, but she told me about a situation where she was going to a church, and while she was at this church, the pastor would text her really late at night and say things to her, nothing that was really just inappropriate, but just text her really, really late at night. And he was, at one point was asking her, I believe, to like come to go over to her home and visit her and things like that, like late at night. And I'm like, you're using your position to get close to somebody that that's single, that's alone, this, that, and the third. Like you're really abusing your position, and you're spiritually trying to abuse this young lady by using your authority, quote unquote, to get somewhere you shouldn't get.
Wolves, man, I tell you, wolves.
Yeah, I remember the example. I know what you're talking about now. So, in the instance that I had, the person that was describing the instance didn't describe it as spiritual abuse, but I felt like it probably falls into that category. But I went to a Bible study, like a singles and young adults Bible study about a year ago in one of the churches here in Dallas. And one of the young ladies was saying how she, I guess, considers the senior pastor, to be her spiritual father. And we should talk about that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
We'll circle back around. But she considers him to be her spiritual father. And so I guess as a part of this relationship, he was helping her to manage her finances by holding all of her money. So essentially she would have to bring her paychecks to him, and then he would hold on to them in envelopes, and then he would give her enough for her bills or for what she needed. And then if she wanted things in excess, she would have to go back and, ask him, hey, I want money for this. This is kind of what I need it for. And so, again, she did not describe this as spiritual abuse. She described it as something that was beneficial to her. But there are many, many instances wherein that is not beneficial. And I think it makes sense to talk about what is spiritual abuse, right? Because I think it's such a broad topic, and you just kind of throw it out there. And I think in a lot of ways it can get
misconstrued and lost.
Very misconstrued, very, very quickly. So I think it's important to acknowledge that spiritual abuse is a abuse of your power, right? It's using the power that you have within the institution of the church, or as somebody that people look to for guidance, or people have reverence for, respect for, and then using that power, that leverage to get things done or to do things that you would not otherwise
taking
have.
Advantage, pretty
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and that can be financially, that can be emotionally, that can be physically, sexually, mentally, that can be tons of other ways.
Yeah, let's park here for a second, because there are a few things we can talk about. One thing you said about the abuse, which really makes me unfortunately think of, like the Catholic Church and how they have a culture of spiritual abuse, that they even protect.
Without prosecution either.
Without, on their own island, essentially, at least legally. They have no They have no responsibility to any of the laws of the land that surround them. Which I don't even know how you even get that set. Like, how do you even get that approved? I don't know. That's crazy. That's a whole nother episode.
Well,
You talking about the Vatican?
Well, yeah. So the Vatican, that's where,
That's where, yeah.
yeah.
Well, and y'all know that spiritual abuse that spans back even through the Bible. It was something that God was vehemently against, right? It was one of the reasons why He hated the false religion so much, right? Because so many of them will require these people to self-mutilate, so often mutilate, torture, kill children.
Yeah.
And that's what they were. You know, there's I can think of 3 stories offhand in the Bible where he ran into things like that. I think about like Elijah when they were praying for the rain to come down, right? And they were for hours cutting themselves, dragging themselves so they bleed. Jesus, when he tells us how to pray, you know, he says, don't go around like chanting and cutting yourself and mutilating yourself like they do. Like, you shouldn't be doing that, right? So I think spiritual abuse as a whole, when you talk about it, especially from a physical standpoint and with things involving children, I think that just spans back all the way until the depths of these, just these smaller sect and even larger religions, you know, but they those practices don't stem from the church. I just think it's important to.
Spiritual abuse was at the foundation of the justification of slavery. When you think about it, they used the Bible and misquoted it, tore pages out of it, and just changed the whole context to justify a system that allows you to treat people any kind of way you want it. So if you need, that's probably one of the biggest examples of spiritual abuse you can look at right now, like in today, and look at the effects of that. We're still
Wait,
dealing
so
with it.
you're saying, clarify that for me again.
The use of the Bible to justify slavery is a form of spiritual abuse.
But we're just
In
talking
what
about
way?
various examples of spiritual abuse, so that's not the way. It's just
No. He's listening to that example. I'm just asking, like, in what way would you classify that as spiritual abuse?
It's perverting the scriptures to
benefit
to
yourself.
condone a system that God is completely against.
And to benefit yourself. I think the biggest indicator of spiritual abuse is when you are, like you said, circumventing God to benefit yourself.
Right.
The entire they would not have taught. You can even argue, like, would they have taught slaves Christianity, right? Like, if they didn't do it to their benefit, right?
Right.
To Chris's point, they were ripping out portions that were very necessary to put together the full piece, right?
Right.
Using the Bible, weaponizing the Bible. It's one of the things that y'all always see me get fired up about. It's like the easiest way to send me over the edge, just to start weaponizing the Bible.
Okay, so I guess back up. What do we define spiritual abuse as?
So
You missed that whole.
No, it's very vague. It sounded very vague.
So spiritual abuse could be any abuse of power or position, and that abuse can manifest itself financially, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally. Anytime I use my position, my influence, my leverage, whatever I have, to put you in a position or to benefit myself
At your
your expense, while also perverting what God has said, or changing or altering what God has said.
What would you define?
I was
I
gonna say
don't.
the same thing.
I don't know. It's so broad. Like to me, because I've heard so many different things, and I also think this is a relatively new term for me. So my understanding was very broad.
Yeah, it's not a term I've used.
Yeah, so I think I've heard spiritual abuse in the last maybe 2 months, really not outside of this context. But I've heard church hurt a lot. Yeah. And I think we've been saying spiritual abuse, church hurt. I think they could be the same thing.
I think they can be synonymous.
So I don't know if I have a clear-cut definition of what spiritual abuse is. I think there are abuses that happen in the church. Like you said, it's financial, relational abuse, like you talked about, even that example you gave. I think that's dangerously close to a form of abuse, but I don't know if I could say, oh, this is definitively spiritual abuse.
So how would you
I feel
define it? Go ahead.
I feel like church hurt and spiritual abuse can definitely be different, because you have to be directly impacted to be spiritually abused, in my opinion. Whereas with church hurt, it doesn't even have to involve you. For example, I can witness something that you may be dealing with, and I may be church hurt behind something that you're experiencing with our pastor that you maybe confide in me about.
Okay.
So that can be church hurt, because I'm upset or I'm hurt by what's going on within my church.
Gotcha.
But to be spiritually abused, you're typically the victim.
Yeah, it's a direct effect on you.
It's direct. Whereas the other one can be direct or indirect at
Yeah,
the
so
same
that's
time.
what I'm saying. It can be synonymous, but it's not necessarily definitively synonymous. Okay.
And there is no. This is a fairly new topic, so there is no concrete definitions, right? And that's why it's important to kind of draw some parameters, right? Because I would agree there is a difference between church hurt and spiritual abuse,
Right.
right? Church hurt is typically leans more in the emotional, right? Somebody hurt your feelings in something that they did,
Or said.
or in a way that they did it, right? It's typically attached to an individual, right? I think when I think spiritual abuse, I think of an intentional manipulation of the word of God to inflict harm for your own gain on somebody else. And church hurt isn't always that. A lot of times church hurt is somebody telling you that they don't like the guy that you're dating, or somebody telling you that
Your dress is too
that your
this.
dress is, yeah, you know, these are things which are not, nobody's making an argument for them, but I'm just saying, like, those, I don't know that they fall into the category of being abusive so much as, like you said, church hurt, but I think spiritual abuse for sure is something that directly manipulate. It's when you intentionally manipulate the word of God, right? Like, if I think the way you can tell a difference is if you would repeat it in front of God, right? So, like, old church mothers, they tell girls, you shouldn't wear that dress. She would say that in front of God, right? Because in her heart, she genuinely thinks, I'm saying the right thing, right? Like, I'm telling what God want me to say, you shouldn't wear that dress, right? That's something that would cause church hurt. In her heart, she genuinely knew. But I would say that spiritual abuse is when you know.
You wrong.
You know, when God says so. So when was the last time you paid this man for the work he was doing for you? Because my word says a man should work to eat.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? A man should be paid for work that he does, right? So you wouldn't repeat that in front of. Does that make sense?
So spiritual abuse has to be an intentional action. Like, it can't be an accidental.
I don't want to say that concrete, but I want to
Okay.
say
I was
that
about
for
to-
sake of discussion.
Gotcha.
I think that no abuse has to be intentional. Abuse is abuse. If
Right.
it's abusive to the person that was abused, right?
Yeah.
That's just period on period. But in order to move the conversation forward, I'm just thinking that we should talk through intentional misrepresentations or weaponizations of the word
Right.
of God.
And that's what
for
we're
your own
speaking to,
personal gain.
the
Yeah.
intentional abuse, not the, like you said, the accidental church hurt that you may experience or witness, or the unintentional abuse you may cause, but very intentional and disobedient, defiant, whatever you want to call it, actions that directly go against what we represent, what you claim to represent, to, you know, better yourself in whatever way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I was to think about it biblically, I would say the difference between spiritual abuse and church hurt is like with church hurt, that's an offense, right? The Bible would classify that as an offense. And the Bible gives specific ways to address offenses, right? These are things that are like, you did this against me. It's an offense. But then there's the scripture where Jesus says, those who intentionally lead my children astray, it will be worse than the worst hell you can imagine for you, right? And that is spiritual abuse, right? You see what I'm saying? Like that.
Yeah.
I would think if Jesus looked at it and say, you know you was dead wrong when you hurt this person, but your heart, like, I don't, like, does that make, does
It makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect
What I'm
sense.
saying, like,
And
because I just think if we box ourselves in trying to get a concrete, is this abuse or is it not?
There's no point in doing
Yeah,
it.
Yeah.
you can't even really do that
We'll
even
go
when
in
it's not
circles.
spiritual abuse. People can't even agree on. You know what I mean? Like, I hate to get touchy, but was this rape? Was this not? Did she give consent? Did she not? Like, we have all of these instances now where we can't even. You know what I'm saying? So if you try to get to a common ground of let's all agree that this is the black and white line for abuse. At the end of the day, abuse is if the abused said that they were
Is it
abused.
abused?
Period.
True.
Like,
True.
you know, but for the sake of discussion, we can draw the line. I think
intentional.
at the intentional misuse for your own gain.
Exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
whether that be your own sexual gain, financial gain, spiritual gain, whatever it may be.
Any game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. Hearing y'all talk about it, one of the ways I identify with spiritual abuse, and it's definitely an unintentional thing that I do. I would do that thing where you, like you said, Whitney, where you weaponize the Bible against somebody because they did something that you didn't agree with, or, you know, you have a different perspective. So, or maybe they are wrong. Maybe they are just dead wrong in what they are doing. Maybe you're dead right in what you're saying, but the way you deliver that is very demeaning or very judgmental. You know, you're just using the Bible to beat them down and prove your point. That's something that I've unfortunately done and had to have learned and grow in maturity and how to like express myself, because there is still a level of like, you know, accountability, whatever you want to call it, where, you know, at times I do have a responsibility to speak up on something, but my attitude towards it or behind it and the way I delivered it wasn't in the right place. And it probably came off I know it came off as abusive. So go ahead.
So you're so in that example, you're saying that them them disagreeing, you're disagreeing with something they did?
I'm either disagreeing with something they did. It's more, it's in this type of situation, it's less about a disagreement and more about me thinking that they're wrong in an action.
So
Because a
you-
disagreement can be like, I see it one way, you see it another way, but you're not necessarily wrong. Or
Right.
I can't say that you're in sin for the way that you see it. I just think that my perspective is maybe more accurate.
But in this example that you're giving, is somebody wrong?
Right. Yeah.
Excuse me. And you're saying that your delivery was.
I'm saying my motivation for even correcting it probably wasn't in the right place. It wasn't because I care. It's like, yeah, I do care for you, but more than anything, I want to show you that you're wrong and that I'm right, and that I want you to feel bad. Like all those other personal motives, like you said, like we've been saying, it's supposed to make me feel better. Like
So you would
Abuse.
classify that as spiritually abusive?
because I know my internal motivations were to make myself feel better for being right and for proving that you're wrong or showing that you're wrong. Thus saith the Lord. Like that in itself, yeah. I would
You would
classify that.
classify that as spiritually abusive?
It's easily
I would.
spiritual.
Yeah,
abuse
I would say
because,
that.
because his heart's intention was to inflict pain on
Right. To
somebody
hurt
else.
someone, yeah.
That is sinful.
That was your that.
That-
okay,
it was-
okay,
it was-
okay,
it was-
now see, I'm glad she said that. What is the difference between spiritual abuse and sin? Because if we're gonna go with that, then like you open that very broad,
You
and
know
I
what?
and I think abuse is very like it's very specific, right? So like you're not gonna get like a wide berth for sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is literally legally and I think socially confined to like very specific things, right? It's yeah.
No.
No.
So there's not many people that would disagree that rape is sexual abuse, molestation is sexual abuse, statutory rape, sexual abuse. Like what I'm saying is like there are concrete things that we can give to sexual abuse, right?
Right.
No.
Well, I mean, yeah, there are
Yes,
concrete things.
there
but-
are
There
concrete
are
things.
concrete things, but I think in the way that you're trying to say it. So, like for example, just for what school I went to, so I went to Mizzou, and over the past weekend, the girls kind of went through this thing where they were freeing themselves of their own sexual, their own sexual abuse histories, right? And so what they were doing, what they were going through, and they were telling their stories, right?
Okay.
So then they were saying things like, and they would tag the guy, right? So imagine to be like, at Chris, I remember one time, imagine you minding your business, and then you get a ding, like somebody tagged you on a tweet, and it says, I remember one time my freshman year of college, I was at a party with this guy named Chris, and we were both drunk, and I fell asleep, and he said he would take me home, but in the way to the car, I guess in the way over there on the car, we started kissing, and he took it as more than it was, and so then we ended up having sex, but I regretted it the next night, and I didn't want to have sex, I was under the influence, but it was rape, right? And then he was like, whoa, hold on, that's not rape, like, we was kissing, and things, would have went too far, but,
Well, legally.
yeah, but to that
Legally,
woman, she's
that is-
saying that was rape, and in the culture that we're in,
It's rape.
they will say that was rape.
I mean, but legally, that's my point.
Right.
You can point. That's my point. Just you can point to specific things that we could say that's sexual abuse. Like you're not gonna. I'm not saying there's not gray area. I'm not. So there is gray area. But what I'm saying is, to that example, if we're saying that sin is now spiritual abuse.
That's not what he said.
No, what I'm saying is that we are spending too
No,
much
no.
time in the conversation trying to box in the
I'm not trying to box
definition
in.
of
I'm trying to
sexual
get. I was just.
And I just don't think that what I'm saying, my point is that abuse is a wide topic, right? Abuse is always sin because
Yeah.
abuse is anything that causes pain to somebody else. Anything that is sinful is something that causes pain to somebody else, right? If you inflict hurt, if you do something to somebody, whether intentional or unintentional, that if somebody did it to your child, if your child came home and said, Mommy, so-and-so did blank, if you would be mad about it, it was probably something that you shouldn't have did to somebody else. But that's too wide of a frame to try to narrow down. I understand what you're saying, but I just think like,
I was just trying to get clarification with me.
Yeah,
I
go
mean,
ahead.
I get that, but
So what I was trying to get to was okay. So you're saying that in that example, you were trying to intentionally beat them down with you being right, or was that just the outcome of it?
No, it was definitely mixed into my intentions, into my motivation.
And
Yeah.
so you're saying like in that scenario, you would classify that as spiritual abuse,
Right, because I've delivered a similar message behind to somebody because I felt that they were in the wrong and I was in the right, and I did it 100% the right way with no what I would call toxic motivations or energy into it. It was just me simply wanting to get my brother or sister on the right path.
To the right- yeah,
right.
yeah.
So I've done it, and I know what that feels like when I do it with that as a sole motivator, and then I know what it feels like when I'm doing it and it's a little more personal. It's a little more emotional.
Like a hidden agenda almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess what would be, so what happens when like same situation, your heart is like pure, you just want them to be on the right track, and they still come back and say like, oh, like I wasn't feeling it. Same outcome basically. Only thing that's different is your heart. Same outcome, they still feel attacked or whatever.
I would deal with it as if I was spiritually abusive, even though I know I wasn't trying to be, because of what we've been saying, which is if all it takes, sometimes unfortunately, for somebody to say they were abused is to feel like you abused me.
So question. So is it about, like, is it your heart that makes the situation, that makes you abusive, or is it
Absolutely.
them feeling that they're abused?
I think, can I jump in real quick?
Go ahead.
I think it's a combination of both.
Okay.
Because I feel like if I say something or do something, let's say to Wit, and she takes it as abuse, but I take it as me trying to show her love or compassion or whatever, and she
Right.
takes it that way, her perception is what matters. Because it doesn't matter how I come at her. It doesn't
Okay.
matter what I say. It matters on how she feels about it.
Okay.
And that has to be counted into effect. And then that's when you come and say, well, how could I relate this information to
Yeah,
you
right.
in a
Yeah,
way
yeah.
that didn't make you feel this way? Because
Right.
regardless of what you're saying, you never want anyone to feel beat down. You never want anyone to feel like they're being abused by
Yeah.
what you're saying, what you're
Yeah.
trying to convey. So both of them actually count, especially your intentions. If your intentions are at a level where you're like, I want them to hurt, I want them to feel bad about what I'm saying to them,
Right.
then it's definitely spiritual abuse. And if someone takes it as abuse, then it's still considered spiritual abuse to that person, because perception is always key.
So I would agree. I think it's probably both. My only I guess, as we're trying to just flesh out how we see it, I guess my only thing would be, where do we draw the line in terms of like, you need to work through how you feel versus what the situation was, because like I could, like, if I came to Chris, right, I said, Chris, I've been noticing on social media you've been posting, you know, I don't know, let's just say you've been posting like crazy stuff.
I have.
Oh no.
Chris, I'm seeing butt cheeks on your Instagram
Wait a
timeline.
minute.
Way too much,
Those
dog.
were the days.
What? What?
No, joking, no.
So
Those
like,
days are far behind.
so like,
Right.
Far behind, butt cheeks, get it?
far behind.
Wow.
You're corny.
Sorry.
But so like, I come to you like, hey, bro, like I've been seeing this. Like I think, like, as somebody who, you know, leading here, leading there, I think you need to, you know, tighten up, kind of stop, right?
Right.
And you know, you take it the completely wrong way.
Like tighten up on the cheeks.
Like,
Tighten up on posting the cheeks. Yes, I get it.
but yeah, like relax.
Right.
But you take it the completely wrong way, right?
Uh-huh.
So like, obviously, if I come to you and be like, you're a sinner, you're going to hell, you're wrong, like, obviously, like, that's over
It's
the
the
top.
wrong delivery.
Right. So my
Wrong
question
tone.
would be,
Right.
wrong tone, wrong delivery, just
Wrong person.
just wrong.
Uh-huh.
Right. But what happens when I come to you, right?
Uh-huh.
And I just sit you down out of love,
Right.
and like, where do we draw the line and say, actually, it doesn't matter how I said it, because your heart is just not being convicted. Because I think in that scenario, there is also room for there to be like this thing where, like, it doesn't matter how you come to people, if they're not in the position to be receiving that correction because of their heart, it's not
I get
gonna
you.
matter.
Can I
So-
jump
got
in
it.
one more time right quick? Just
One of
real
y'all,
quick. Just
either
real
one.
quick. Real quick. With situations like that, let's say it's you and Chris, like the example you just gave.
Yeah.
You all have a relationship, you know each other.
Yeah.
If you come at him in a way and you say, "Hey, Chris," and you're demeaning him, that's spiritual abuse. But if you come at him,
Yeah.
you're showing nothing but love, nothing but
Yeah.
kindness, this, that, and the third, and he's still taking it that way. That's when you two have a conversation. That's when you take the relationship and the tenure of knowing each other that you have, and you have a conversation.
Right.
Why do you feel as though this is abuse? Why do you feel as though this is this? And then let him give his answer and the reason why he feels that way, and you have a conversation. And so either he understands that you're not coming at him that way, and also based on the relationship, when you have that relationship, because you shouldn't do this with strangers. When you have that kind of relationship,
100% agree.
when you have that kind of relationship, they'll know and believe who you are. Well,
I
I
think
think
you
this
would
is
like
my-
that to happen.
I think this is my critique, like for the church, right? Because I think it's interesting that in a conversation wherein we have at least dozens of souls who have been abused, who we have their testimonies that we could be talking through, as a church, we would rather debate, well, what's really abusive? What can I really say that's the real line of being abusive? And I think that's a church-wide issue. It's an issue that I think a lot of Christians are going to have to answer for. You know what I mean? Because I think at the end of the day, that's not the issue, right? When Jesus, I remember when they were about to stone a woman, right, for cheating. Right, she had cheating on her husband. They was about to stone her, kill her in the middle of the street.
Caught
Per
in
the law.
the act.
Per the law.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Justified.
They was ready. Jesus didn't say, well, she didn't do. He said, well, she was wrong. So whoever ain't sin, throw the first stone. I think as Christians, we get a little power hungry, right? And that's what makes it, that makes it
Self-righteous.
very, very, very easy to start abusing that power, right? But when you consider it to be your duty to be the one to correct your brother or sister, right? Out of all of the duties that the Bible gives you, not to say that that's not a responsibility, but accountability is your responsibility. Correction is not. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
accountability is as Christians. Hey man, you talking to Chris because Chris is your friend. Chris wouldn't then turn around and say Trey is spiritually abusing me for telling me not to put my, like, you see the context how that the chance that would happen is 0.0000001%.
I don't think you can say that
the,
definitively
because you have the space, you have the relationship to say that, right? I think at the end of the day, to try to, it's problematic to say, well, what's really abusive? I think when you got to start asking that question, probably two things before that was started to get towards abuse.
I would disagree.
I could tell.
Only because if we just go around saying, well, oh, that's abusive, well, that's abusive, then the real issue here is like,
Let me interject
if
right
you
now.
don't define what is abusive, then it leads it up to the person.
But my
And so
question is
my only-
realistically, who's doing that? Who's saying that that's abusive when there was no abuse when there was nothing that
Are
anybody
you-
could, like,
Are you
I get why
asking
I get
what-
why he's asking the
I
question.
get
I
what he's
just
saying, but I'm saying it is problematic to
I don't think it's
to debate
problematic
that.
because I think if that's the case, you leave it up to interpretation, and then literally anything's abuse.
I think it's hugely problematic, and let's just take it away from the spiritual abuse, because you mentioned earlier, you said that there are certain things that are definitely categorized as abuse. If a mom or father is abusing their child, and the child takes it as abuse because they got black eyes and busted lips, and the parent says it's not abuse because that's what my father did to me, is it still not abuse?
We can look, and that's
But
my
that's
point.
what
We
I'm
can
saying,
look
if
at
you- that's-
legally
but
and
that was
see
my
what
point
is
20
abuse.
minutes ago when you said that it wasn't what you were trying to prove, is that you are trying to find a definitive way to say this was abuse and this was not. And in the case of victimhood, that's not a thing. When you cause an offense to somebody,
it's a possible picture to draw. It's an
Okay,
impossible thing
okay.
to
It's not, I don't think it's
to
impossible
or to define.
So this is, I think, again, to that example, what happened when you have a child who got a whooping? You know, I'm not talking like a black eye. I'm not talking like a beating. I'm just talking like a whooping. They call CPS. My parent abused me, and CPS removes that child from the home when really that's discipline.
that doesn't happen. That's where the
Whitney,
what
Adrian-
CPS
it happened to Adrian
what-
Peterson.
I literally work in social work. What
happened
CPS
to
agent will
Adrian
just
Peterson.
after a
Adrian
prank
Peterson,
phone call
dog.
from a child say, "I'm going to come here and take this kid because he called us and said you beat him." The first thing they're going to do is go and perform an
Investigate.
investigation, right? All people are saying is that if somebody says I've been abused, the church should say, let's investigate it. If
I'm
they
not
show up to
saying-
the house
I'm
and
not-
say,
I'm not
this
saying
boy ain't
let's
been
not-
abused, he got in trouble, that's dead on dead.
I'm not saying let's
Nobody
not
would classify it
investigate
as abuse.
Nobody's
It's
saying
what-
let's not investigate it.
So what
I'm
are
saying,
you-
how do you investigate something you don't have any parameters for?
That means it's probably not your business to be
I think
investigated.
because here's why I think she's saying the question is problematic, because I don't think we have we don't have the ability to define abuse in some situations, right? Because sometimes, like in my situation, you could look at my situation, like the one I described where I was telling somebody they were wrong.
I think it
was
go
right.
either way.
Right. What I'm saying is, if you take that situation and put it on paper, I wasn't abusing them. I was just telling them the truth of the reality and what I think the Bible says, what I think they should do according to God. If you look at that objectively on paper, there's no abusive element to that. But if you analyze my heart, you see that I'm in the wrong place, and it is abusive. So it's problematic to try to define what is abusive, what is not, because we don't have the ability to know what is, because we don't know motivations of people's hearts, and like it changes from situation to situation. Something that's abusive in one situation could not be abusive in another, based off of various like details. So I think the attitude of, if I do something to somebody and they took it as abuse, as the person who did the alleged abuse, treating it as if you did abuse them, even though you know, at least internally, you had no motivations of abusing them, you had no ulterior motive, you were approaching them in love. If they still took it as that, you give them that respect and you deal with them as that, but you don't have to internalize that as if you actually abused them. I
Because
think
that's just humanity. That's just
yeah,
to say,
that's just me being
yeah.
compassionate.
And
That's
I
just me
would do
being
that
human.
with a friend. If I offended a friend, I know I speak very directly, right? I pride myself on watching my tongue, but I'm a direct speaker, right? Especially so when it gets to things about conflict, I'm like, listen, this is the issue right here,
Right.
And then it's like, well, hold on, we could have just like worked our way up to this, and I'm like, okay, well, but I often have to say, I didn't mean to make you feel that way, right?
Right.
Like even though I rarely ever feel like what I said was wrong, if I hurt somebody that I loved as a Christian, as a brother in Christ, your first reaction shouldn't be to defend the offender. Your first reaction should be to run to the aid of the victim. What, like, whoa, why is this person saying that there's been hurt, abused? And then if you get there and they say, well, she told me that my shorts was booty shorts and I shouldn't wear them to church, then when you say, okay, well, sis, I don't think this is abuse, right? But how do you handle it with your own loved ones? If somebody say you hurt me, I don't get to say, well, that's too dang bad. You need to toughen up. I say, oh my God, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to hurt you. I hate that you've been feeling like that for XYZ days, right? But like, I think it says a lot to instantly say, well, whoa, let's run to the aid of the offender, because they might call everybody an abuser. It's the same tactic that they use that cops are using right now. Hold on, you ain't gonna try to say all cops are bad cops. If we just let them get away with saying
did you see
this
that
one bad
video?
apple.
Did you see that video of the cops
Which one?
gathered around City Hall? Oh no.
You talking about them congressmen and them dashikis?
No, but that's
I'm like, don't even get me started on this, y'all.
kneeling in the dashiki. I don't know who approved that photo.
Oh my
but God dog. God dog. We took a
Pause
left turn.
Pause the tape. Oh, that was wild.
I'm sorry, that
I
was
was so-
serious.
And the overcompensation.
Did they go Wakanda
The
Forever?
guy-
Did they go
Yes.
Wakanda Forever?
Like, we forgive y'all. Just get up.
Please get up.
Just
Like,
get
Come
up.
on, come on.
Golly.
Make us not want to kneel.
Oh,
doing it.
man.
Cringy.
But yeah, I just think that should be there. Cause like even now we spent the whole episode like, but let's make sure we got a real.
But that's
and-
funny. It's necessary.
It's necessary, but I think it should be a short thing, cause it should be a thing like.
You would want it.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think it should, in the church in general, like, I think a lot of Christians face this exact type of friction when
And I
they
think
try
that's
to
why-
take something to their church leadership.
I think
right?
a lot of times conversations like this that can continue to go on, and this is a good place for it to be had. But in certain circles and certain situations, it shouldn't take this long to establish what abuse is, because the victim gets forgotten about.
Exactly.
Because everyone's saying, Chris, this happened at the church, and they're saying, well, it's not that big of a deal. What do you mean it's not that big of a deal? This is really big to me. It happened at this church, and they minimize it because they don't think it's that big of a deal, and we shouldn't. And that's not the way it works. That's not how it should work at all.
Yeah, and I think these conversations are good because it just unveils the different mindsets and the potential issues that come when you're trying to like have those conversations. Like, everybody's view of abuse is different. Everybody's opinion on how you should handle alleged abuse is different. So yeah, like, to kind of move past that point, that's to answer your question, Trey. I don't think the onus is on us to define abuse. That's on God. I don't think he wants us to worry about whether this person was legitimately abused or this person wasn't. He wants us to treat everybody who feels they were abused as if they were abused, and let him deal with everybody's heart who's involved, and give specific instructions to the person who feels abused, who shouldn't. Hey, maybe you should look at it this way because you're too wrapped up in your own emotions that you can't see the truth people are telling you. And to the person is actually abusing and maybe not even realizing it, God would tell, hey, you're teaching my truth, but teaching my truth isn't enough. You have to teach it in love. And if you teach it in love, you miss the whole point. So you being right is irrelevant. And honestly, it's more counterproductive because you're pushing them further away from me with the way you're trying to give them truth.
I mean, I would 100% agree. We got like this. My question got taken like real big.
I got you.
I was just trying to
No,
speak
it's
to
fine.
like Chris's example of like person to person in that exact situation. But yeah, my questions got blown out.
And to your point, like that mindset that you just spoke to, like, I can say that used to be, especially in like relationships with women, like that would be my mindset. Like, why are you taking it like that? I didn't say it this way. I didn't mean it this way.
Well,
I did this,
and I would,
and this.
and I would say that's a maturity thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think when on a person to person level, it's hard to understand people if they can't tell you when they're hurt. You know what I'm saying? I was just like, I'm real big on words, and so just in that situation, me personally, I wouldn't see that as abusive. Like, to me, abuse is like a consistent, you know what I'm saying, pattern, track record. But that's just me. I wouldn't classify that specific example as being abusive. You know what I'm saying?
That's fair. I mean,
and so, like, again, my questions was just to that specific example. Like, it got blown out.
I get
you. Know
you.
what I'm saying? But
so let's talk about the negative. Yeah, I mean, call them just the consequences in general of this type of abuse and how we've seen that play out. Like, you know, how that manifests in people.
Man, with spiritual abuse, like the ramifications of it. I mean, think about it. An entire church that was fought, and that's the reason why we should never put pastors on pedestals. An entire ministry, an entire congregation will follow a pastor. The pastor does something and they fall off of this pedestal because of spiritual abuse, because of misappropriation of funds, whatever it may be, and then that congregation falls completely away from the church. And they'll believe, because they thought that man was a peer, and if he can fall, then everybody can fall.
yeah,
True.
And people will completely walk away from church,
Yeah.
completely walk away from ministry, and then people end up getting lost.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest issues.
I think I have a natural aversion to following individuals within the faith or, you know, any type of ministry. I can be a fan of what they do. I can support it, be a part of it, you know, but I just find, and it's never, I'm not going to say never, but most of the times it's not around what they do specifically, even though sometimes they can do things that make me not want to align with their platform anymore. But most of the times it's how people receive them. And like you said, the pedestal that people put them on. And unfortunately, they become like a cult leader because they were
They
made
did.
into one, you know, and it's not like they're out
they
here
didn't ask
telling-
for it though.
Yeah, they didn't ask
A lot
for
of
it.
times
So
they
it's like, and it's never,
Almost
like I said,
sometimes.
it's never a problem I have with them, but I naturally tend to steer away from those type of ministries because now I feel like it's not about the God or the gospel. It's about that person and where they're going and what they're doing and what they're saying. And yeah, that's how you get suckered into those, I won't say suckered, but that's how you get roped into those situations where you're vulnerable to be spiritually abused because now your perception is wrapped into something that is flawed, which is
You're
a
right,
man.
a person.
Yeah.
And you become susceptible to anything.
And
Something that God has kind of been saying to me through like my prayer time this week is He's been showing me that the ability to glorify something is a position of the heart, right? So if you are able to glorify a pastor, right, it means that you have in your heart decided that pastor has something that you don't have that you feel like you need, right? For one, and because they have that thing, this could be a pastor, a celebrity, whatever the case may be, they are somehow worthy and you are not. And when you look at it that way, then you somehow believe that person is better than you. You see what I'm saying? And so if that pastor that you have now glorified because you felt like, well, yeah, but Mike Ty got this, and that, like he got to be better than me. You know what I'm saying? Clearly, he got a mega church.
He got to be stronger.
He got a family. He got to be
He
better.
can break
doing
down
something.
mountains.
You see what I'm saying?
Anything.
But it's a heart issue to be able to glorify something, right? And I don't think we call it what it is. We call it standing, right? We like, oh, I stand this.
Oh,
I stand that.
I think I've been sitting down.
But,
standing.
yeah,
I've
but
been sitting down for years. I ain't standing
but
nothing.
I think a
except-
lot of people glorify their pastor, right?
True.
And I think that they don't necessarily realize it, but you expect that my pastor is a little bit further along in life. He's better than me. That's the level I'm trying to get to. When they fall off, you've now lost what you were working towards. You see what I mean? And I
It
think
was-
that's what hurts people.
It's like they make this pastor, they put him on a pedestal. He becomes like their North Star.
Yeah.
Like they're lost and trying to find their way home or trying to find their way somewhere.
Yeah.
And this pastor was their director and
Yeah.
direction. And they're trying to follow that, but then that star falls.
But
And
I
that's
think-
why I love how Michael Todd, that's why I love how Michael Todd is so transparent about how raggedy he is, because I think any pastor in leadership, I almost feel like you have an additional obligation to
You
be
have
more
to
transparent,
bruh.
because you have, the Bible calls Christians sheep for a reason. He calls us sheep for a reason. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so if you are, sheep will follow the German Shepherd that's just called to get him into the gate. And we following the German Shepherd running around the yard, and he's trying to like run into the gate, and we like following the German Shepherd. You see what I'm saying? Like, and I think that's kind of what happens in the churches. We just follow, and I think pastors have an increased responsibility to be transparent. Like, listen, I'm literally no different than you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I love how Michael Todd is just very clear about, like, I used to be a manipulator. And he says it very cut and dry. Not like, oh, I struggle with perfectionism.
Nah, he
but
was a
like,
scammer.
I used to be a manipulator.
He was a
like,
credit cards and a scammer.
He's like, I was trying to
out.
find my
And a
mugshot right
scammer.
now. Like, you
Credit
know what I'm
cards.
saying? Like, but in doing that, I think people have more of a big brother look to him than like the father I never had. And I think that those carry two different like levels of responsibility. And I think more pastors should be like big brothers.
I would.
I have a good question for y'all, but go ahead, Trey.
I was just gonna say, I think you brought it up perfectly, because I think when you look at just even one of y'all brought up like slavery in the Bible, but even like going back to that, how slaves literally had to get certain parts of the Bible from their slave masters, like they were only given those certain things.
Right.
I think when you operate from that standpoint of like, I'm going to, like, a majority of my spiritual formation is coming from my pastor, I think that's a problem, because that takes out the personal relationship that God seeks to have with you. True. And I think when you get to that level, when you start putting people on pedestals, I think even then, like, I think even that is like a sign that you're not properly viewing like the body as a whole, because like, you know, 1 Corinthians 12 tells us like there's like no part of the body is more important than the other. We just have different functions. We just have different roles. But I think in westernized and specifically in America, like we put these people on pedestals, and then it's like you said, Jarrell, when people fall, it's like, dang,
Where do I go?
where do I go? What do I do? And now it's like, and when you put that in the context of spiritual abuse, when people see people like, you know, like the situation with the Lindsays, who have a worldwide following, who, you know what I'm saying, they have masses following them, and it's like, oh wow, these people were doing all this stuff that, you know, now I'm like, wow, that's horrible. Like, now they're like, okay, wait a minute, is the Bible really like, you know, a thing? And so I think when you get in this situation where, like, you know, spiritual abuses, or even if it's like, even like bad doctrine, because I've even heard some things coming from their side, like on like speaking in tongues, where I'm like, wait a minute, like, I don't know if that's 100% true, but it's like when you have these things and people follow you, you're now, they may be following you, but when you fall, like, they're completely lost and completely detached from the Lord.
True.
Something you just said, and something that Whitney said a minute ago, I'm going to comment on both. Whitney said there's a reason we're considered sheep. Sheep, like you said, they'll follow pretty much anything, but they have no defense skills. They can't protect themselves from anything.
No.
And the only thing that can protect them is the leader.
Yeah.
And so we have to be very careful who we allow our leaders to be.
Sure.
And it's something that you said a minute ago. You mentioned we're all part of the body. And in 1 Corinthians 12, it says, the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you.
Right.
On the contrary, the parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. They're actually the most important parts, the parts that seem to not even matter. So the parts, the congregation, we're the parts that seem to really not matter, because we're just there. We're the sheep. But the Bible says that we're the most indispensable parts.
And really the only difference between you and your pastor is his responsibility. Like, you have the same access to the Lord that your pastor does. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like he's getting a special Bible. He got a special word study that, you know what I'm saying, the words jump out. Like, it's the same Bible. Y'all reading the same thing.
I wouldn't even say responsibility. I would say just the following.
Or I'm spiritually responsible.
Yeah,
spiritually responsible.
And I would say that too. Like, he has a spiritual responsibility to lead his flock.
Yeah.
But as a man of God and a Christian myself, I have responsibility to my flock. It may not be the exact same size flock, but I have that same responsibility.
Yeah.
Question. Speaking of responsibility to flocks.
No.
D's.
So we're all familiar with prosperity preaching, right?
Oh, geez.
Whitney's favorite topic.
Oh, here we go.
So question. Actually, I have so many questions that popped in my head
Don't
based
we
on what y'all
all?
were just saying. I'll pick this one, though. So based off what we're talking about in terms of spiritual abuse, could we classify prosperity preaching within the context of it not preaching the entire gospel, which is doing a disservice to the congregation? If I'm doing that for the purposes of appeasing the congregation because that's what they want to hear, or whatever motivation I have for focusing on this specific avenue of gospel, is that technically classified as now spiritual abuse?
I would say, I would personally say yes. And I would say yes because, I mean, you got to realize that these people are following you for a reason. They look to you for sage advice. They look to you for wisdom. And when you're using that position to ask people and almost require of people to, I went to I won't say the name of the church, but it's probably the biggest church in Dallas, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong.
Which one?
I'm not going to say the name of the
I was about
church.
to say, there's
okay.
there's
we're
only,
not calling it about.
There's only a few.
Not gonna
There's
say the
only
name of the
two
church.
popped in my
Okay.
head.
Good. So that means there's options. So
We're on point.
I was at this church, and while I was there, I think I may have brought this up before, but the pastor asked for maybe like 7 or 8 offerings.
Yeah, I mean,
And I was sitting there like,
That's not that much, bro.
nah, that's a lot. And I'm sitting there like, wait a minute, like you have a building, so there's not a building fund. Like, what do you? And there was no like, we're trying to raise money because this family's needing money for a funeral, or we're doing this, or we're doing. It was just 8 offerings, and I'm sitting there like, what is going on here? It didn't make any sense to me. And also another time I was at a church revival, and I hate
Same church?
no different church.
Okay.
Oh, because I went to that church one time, and was like, nah, this ain't it.
couldn't afford to go back.
I'm about to say, yeah.
I was bouncing checks in the church. How much, Master?
Jarrell Odom, can you please come to the front, please?
For real.
What is
So-
this?
So I was at another church, and at this church, and I'm sure we've all heard it, the pastor's up there, or maybe there's a guest pastor at this revival that's going on for 4 or 5 days.
Jesus.
And so what happens is the pastor will say, I need 500 people to give $1,000 right now. Or I need 250 people, or I need 1,000 people to get $250 together right now. And it's like, wait a minute.
Spiritual man.
Where did that spiritual math come from? Like, where is this coming from? And there's no rhyme or reason for it. If you want to be blessed by God, sacrifice. Wait a second. So the only way I can be blessed by God is if I sacrifice everything I have to give to you and your ministry? That's
Yeah.
it? That's it. And people, they fall prey to these things, and they'll give everything they have and be struggling. That pastor's driving a Rolls Royce and a Bentley and a Rolls Royce Phantom truck and this, that, and the third, and they're struggling. They can't put food on the table for their kids because they gave their last at this revival. Hate to see it.
I would agree. I think that's definitely spiritual abuse on the financial end. For sure. The prosperity
just-
gospel situation, though, I'm gonna land on the other side of the fence on that one. I think that the prosperity gospel.
Yes, I love it.
I think that what we call the prosperity. So there's 2 gospels being referenced essentially, right? The gospel of suffering and the prosperity gospel, right? One gospel, essentially they're the same gospel, but I don't understand how there's a split, and I think that's what I'm working around to. But essentially, the gospel of suffering is the story of Jesus, right? We teach that Jesus suffered. Jesus was the one that conquered this world. Jesus was the one who shed his blood that we may all be saved, right? That's it. That's all. Suffering gospel, put it all in Jesus. The prosperity gospel is like you are an
Blessed
image bearer,
abundantly.
of Christ, right?
More than a conqueror.
You are more than a conqueror. You know that you can. God wants wealth and milk and honey for you, right? All I gotta do is go get it. It's out there for the taking. And I think
levels.
both are biblical, and I think to separate one from the other is ungodly.
True.
Truth be told, I was actually talking to Joe about this, and I was telling him that I think the only issue is that churches who only
Focus
consume
on
the
one
prosperity
half.
gospel, right? I think you can, if you just call a spade, you can split it right down the middle between white church and black church, right? You can split it right down the middle between church up in North Dallas, church amongst the congregation who has few of the same worries that a black congregation would have, right? Their teaching is more geared towards how do you make this life prosperous? How do you advance forward into this life? How do you move ahead in a way that God would be proud of? How do you steward your things well, right? Whereas in the black church, it's more so framed as like Jesus fixed it. Like our suffering is gonna come to an end soon. Just hold on. It's more based in faith, more based in put your hope in the Lord. You know what I mean? Like, and they are both equally true, right? I told you I think what's ungodly is the churches who have populations who are less prone to suffering, completely omitting the suffering gospel. And I think it's also sinful to tell a church who is, when I look at the black community, I see them finally walking in the strength that God called them to on the cross. You see what I'm saying? Like, and I think it's dangerous to take that from them by telling them, oh, you should only focus on the suffering. I think the first mandate that God gave us in the Bible, the first one, in the first, like, he made man, and then he said, be fruitful and multiply, right? Not just in the sense of go make kids, right? Because he would have just said multiply or be fruitful. He says be fruitful and multiply. We see this same thing come up in the psalmist, right? David, the psalmist, or one of the psalmists, might not have been David, but in the Psalms, they talk about this concept of, listen, God has given you a territory of things to manage, and when you die, he going to want to report back on how it went. Did you flip the bag, right? Long story short, did you flip your bag? We see Jesus come back and reinforce
Parable
this,
of the
right?
talents, yeah.
He says, you all got something. You are expected to flip it, right?
Gave y'all all a pack.
Everybody got a pack. Listen,
Basically.
quarter brick, half
You
a
know,
brick,
like
whole
God
brick.
will like flip this house, and like when we get to heaven, God gonna be like, move that bus.
Love that bus.
Could be a Shaq body.
Hello, and a lot of us.
Look,
Shaq was worse than
some of us gonna be
out
like,
here.
ta-da.
Is that what you wanted me to do?
I got a 2-bedroom rent. 2-bedroom half
I
bath.
gave you all this on consignment.
Look,
This is what
look,
you gave
look,
me.
look, look, like we was kids.
Was that
I
mash?
think,
Yeah.
and I always reference this, but pastor, one of
Spiritual
a mega church pastor, he had a really good portion of one of his sermons where he said God never made a table, right? He gave man wood, he gave man intellect, and he gave man the ability to learn how to use tools, utilize tools, and then man made a table, and then man built a house, and then man made chairs for the table to go into the house, right? And so in saying that, he was saying that there is not an issue on earth that God is not
Prepared us for.
prepared us to be able to fix, right? So when you look at our broken government system, it's broken because it's Christians that should be in there that's not doing the job that they're supposed to be doing, right?
Say that.
The healthcare system is broken because there's Christians that's supposed to be there.
Because
that
y'all
drop out of
greedy.
school. You know what
Y'all
I'm saying?
greedy.
Like,
I got medical bills now, and y'all are greedy.
but I think the prosperity gospel, I think it's something that I really wish black churches would teach more. I wish we would teach our congregations, how do I come up? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do I take all that God has made available? Because essentially that's what the death of Jesus did, right? It restored us, reconciled us back to where we were with Christ. And so we still live in a fallen world. We still are subject to all types of evils, which is why we have to live under grace and mercy. But we should be walking back in our power right about now, right? So we should be going back and taking over some of these
Technically,
things. And so I think when you talk about suffering happens in seasons. Ecclesiastes will tell you that, right? And so when I think about the early Christians, right, the Christians of Acts and the Pauls, the Peters, they were physically suffering, right? They was just trying to get the ball rolling. So they were literally having their heads chopped off in the streets. Us, we are emotionally suffering, but we are at no risk of having our heads chopped off in the
that's
streets
pretty
here in
weak.
America.
In the US.
And so our job should be to be if you're a Christian in America, you should be multiplying like you literally you should be flipping the bag so fast you need a money counter.
Flip it.
You know what I'm saying? And I
Flip it.
say that because if you have the power to be able to stand in a place and magnify Jesus Christ and put Jesus into these spaces where he normally would not be, and you don't do that, that's ungodly. But that's what the prosperity gospel is teaching, right? It's teaching this is how you use the principles of the Bible to make things shake, right? So I wish we would teach the prosperity gospel, quote unquote, more. To Jarrell's point, the concept of if you do this for God,
Will a
he'll
man
do
rob
this for
God?
you. That is sinful. That is abusive.
That's wild.
That's
But
bad. Yeah, no.
You got a bag and you better flip it. And if your pastor is more so teaching you how to wait for God to flip your bag than teaching you how to flip your bag,
Right.
I'm trying to stay at
but
coach.
your pastor's got a Range Rover,
Right. Or they out there
I need
selling
to-
Jesus
or the church
napkins.
got a Range Rover that they bought from the
Oh,
pastor.
the blood of Jesus now.
Yeah,
You know?
Yeah,
You
you
moving
know.
blood of Jesus now.
Or the prayer cloth.
Yeah, you know, you
You
find
can
Moving
upgrade
them out,
to the
look,
prayer
move-
cloth.
holy water in toothpaste canisters and stuff.
Come on now. Look, I got them in the
Prayer
trunk. Hit me up. $29.95.
The personal prayer package.
A monthly subscription.
Because he's healing it now.
Your prayer ran out because your card declined.
You gotta put it down.
You go ahead. You
on
pay
your blessing.
You pay $60 one time, and we're gonna pray for you every month this year. How do I know that?
I'm gonna take it even different way. So I was gonna go like a completely different way than y'all start talking. I'm gonna just give a different perspective. I think the gospel is prosperous. Like the point of the gospel is that ultimately we will prosper. Those of us that are God's children, when it's time, like ultimately we will prosper, right? Now, like the idea of prosperity gospel, I think you were getting at is like this financial, this I get out what I put in,
That
type of thing.
I was
think
talking about that and
Yes.
just the sole focus on that as
yes.
well.
Now I think that is predatory.
Yeah.
I think that even in some cases can be, not even some. I think that in practice can be very abusive, because then you get people in the mindset of, I haven't done enough, let me do more.
It's evil.
When God is like, wait a minute, you don't got to do nothing else. Like,
Anybody in a spiritual leadership position whose message is you have to do something to earn anything.
they're
from
not
God
teaching the gospel.
is
They're not teaching the
from
gospel
Bible
and,
at all.
And what's crazy is I had a conversation with a friend last night where they were just kind of telling me some things they were going through and like some sin that they were in, and they were like, yeah, I just feel like, I know God's grace. They quote the scripture, his grace is sufficient. Like, I know God's grace is sufficient, but I just feel like my sin is like too much. And in that, I think that is like a direct product of like this idea that we are to work for God's affection. Even in the mindset of, yeah, like we abuse God's grace. I was like, wait a minute. We can't abuse anything. We can't abuse God in any form or fashion. We have no power over God. Like what the reality is, your sin separates you. That's what sin does. It separates you. But we're in this mindset of, I get it, I get out what I put in.
Yeah.
A lot
Very
of
natural.
American Christians, and it's natural. Like even just in a capitalistic society.
That's what we're taught in our homes as kids.
Yeah,
too.
like you if you don't work, you don't eat. God's like, nah, you gonna eat regardless. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And like, and again, like it's a fine line, right? Because you don't just take that and be like, all right, well, I'm just gonna go out here and wild. Nah, like if you really love God, you know what I'm saying? You're gonna be out here working. You're gonna be building this kingdom. But this idea that to gain access to the riches and the glory of God, or like to gain access to like these blessings that we have to put stuff in, is like contradictory to the Bible. You know what I'm saying? Because like we see the dude at the cross, when Jesus was hanging on the cross, my man was stealing and thieving his whole life.
Right. Right.
He had 5 seconds. Like I don't know how much time, but he had like, you know what I'm saying? He didn't have that much time, and he literally was like,
Nah,
it
he was a
his
buzzer
heart.
beater for sure.
He was a buzzer beater.
He was a buzzer beater.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
like that.
it was his heart that changed, and that's all God wants. And so like the idea that you have to put in to get out is completely miscategorizing the Lord. And it's like that is a bad way to get it.
Yeah.
But I will say, in America, prosperity gospel, to I think what you were getting at, is solely like this looking to God for like blessings.
Yeah, it's the expectation of God to provide physical and tangible blessings.
It's almost like when we do that, we have that viewpoint, we put God in this space where he's competing with what he gives us, right?
And devil, no, go ahead. I got devil's advocate after.
And so like almost, okay, like everything in my life is going good, I'm getting what I want, that's the Lord blessing me. Everything's going bad in my life, nothing's going the way I want it to, I must be doing something wrong. It's like, wait a minute, like stop trying to like put God in like this black or white thing. Like sometimes when you look at like, oh, I've got the car I want, I've got the job I want, I've got the relationship I want, and you look at those as blessings of the Lord, you're looking more to what is being given and not to the giver. And so like that relationship is what helps you differentiate, right, between what is and isn't, you know, a quote unquote blessing from God.
From him, and what isn't.
And
What's from the
because
world.
just lost my mic. There it is. Because sometimes like you can be getting what you want, and like the Lord could just be like, I'm not giving that to you, or like like you said, like I've given you the tools to go get what you want. Or sometimes it's like the Lord's like, nah, like I've told you that's not what's for you. I'm gonna just give you over to your own desires and let you find out why that's not for you, right? You know what I'm saying? But like I think that relationship is kind of what X's out that prosperity gospel mentality, because it's like, wait a minute, I've already got I've got my like my true prosperous state, or my true like prosperity is gonna come like when the Lord comes back and I'm in eternity with him, right? But also understanding, like Whit said, like you can't just sit here and wait for that, because you'll also be held accountable. But like that relationship is what puts everything into context.
Yeah, I agree. What's up, Whit?
I think Hello.
There it
Hello.
is. We got probably a short in the core somewhere.
Um,
Yeah, we back.
But it reminds me of like when you go to a restaurant, right? And it say, let's say everybody get a chicken burrito for free, right? God give everybody chicken, right?
Get a beef burrito?
Now, if you
that
want steak,
polo.
Oh, okay.
it's
that
an extra
pollo.
$2.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
That
If you want
carnitas.
shrimp, there's a $4 upcharge.
Scrimps.
Always
I
$4
think
upcharge.
Why
that's
they be
the way
charging for
that
scrimps like that?
I think that's the way that life is, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, the fact that you have breath in your lungs, you got chicken.
That's the chicken burrito.
You know what I'm saying? You
I
got
feel
chicken.
it.
You got chicken, and you got whatever the free toppings is. You want lettuce,
Little
tomatoes,
pico.
or onion. You know what I'm saying? Little pico.
Now,
little
if you want some guacamole, you
Listen,
better.
guac costs
yeah,
extra,
yeah.
even cheese costs extra. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Hey,
but,
cheese costs
but it's not a matter of works that provides the extra $2, extra $4.
No.
The extra $4 is it takes more obedience. It
Yep.
takes more faith. It takes
100%.
more risk. It takes more wisdom. It takes more dedication, right? So you do have to. You can God. I think personally, God gets like. I think He like it when we look and say, you know what? I'm craving salmon. Would you be okay with that? And he say, well, where would you go get salmon from? Right? I think He gets intrigued. He say, well, go catch a salmon. You go catch a salmon, we'll see what happens. Right? Because that's us flipping the bag. That's us saying, well, I got 4, but if I invest them, I'll have 6. He say, invest them, right? I think He gets intrigued by that because that's somebody that He can use.
Yeah.
That's somebody that that's open to direction, that's
Very
open
true.
to
In a vessel.
right. And when you do these things, He promises in His word wealth. He says, I will magnify you, right? I hate to keep bringing him up, but I think about Michael Todd, and I use this example all the time about how he wanted to be a music producer, right? And to your point, God told him, I mean, you can, and his own words were, but I'll take my hand off of you if you do, right? And I looked to fast forward later, he went into ministry, he submitted to God, he kept saying yes, but he put down way more of a deposit in obedience than any of us.
Right.
He put down way more of a deposit in faith, right, than a lot of us to take over all white church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right?
Right.
But in turn for that, now he's doing the same thing he wanted to do, but now he's producing gospel for Kanye West, right? And now he's drawing up shoes
Chateau,
for
come on,
Nike.
somebody.
And so I think it's just a matter of you submitting your desires to God, because the desires of our heart, if you believe in the word, He put them there, right? And so He's saying, I want you to produce, but I want you to produce for my glory. But I'll make you richer than that $100,000 deal you would
But
have
I think
in
your-
doing it for my time.
Your
You see what I'm
point,
saying?
if you submit though.
Yeah, no,
you
I'm
have
agreeing
to
with you.
submit.
Yeah, I'm
I
agreeing.
agree.
I'm saying I think I'm telling everybody, you got chicken, but if you got a taste for salmon,
Go
there's a
after the
reason for that. Go
salmon.
get your salmon, because a lot of people that's like, well, I
Salmon.
personally like chicken. I was gonna come for a veggie burrito, so if I got a chicken burrito, gotta step up, you know, like you know. But if you have a oh God, but I'm craving steak, you know, I think He said go get steak.
Go get you some steak.
God wants you to have
Yeah, I think it would be like that with our kids. Like, right? Imagine if you got your kids something and he said, like, Mama, I want to take my Legos and build a playhouse.
Chris said, God
Build
wants
it.
Playhouse. Let me see what you can do.
Use what you got to get
Use
what
what
you
you
want.
got to get what you want. That's what I want you
Now
to do.
I'm gonna go ahead and play that fine line. All your desires should not be your desires. I will say that. Some of us desire things that if we submit them to the Lord, He'll refine them. And I think that's where that's where you get the outcome when you submit that to the Lord.
Yeah.
Because I think I will say though, like, just because like you want something, you desire something, that doesn't automatically mean it will line up or be given to you, right? Because I think sometimes, like, even for me, I know there are some things that I chase, right? And oftentimes I'll be chasing something and chasing something and chasing something. I'll get frustrated, and for me, like, I get one track minded. So like, if I have something in my mind, whether it be a plan, an idea, or like just a vision of how something should go, when it doesn't go like that, I get frustrated. Or if I see it start to deviate, I'll like dig in deeper. A lot of times, what like I'm trying to do more of is like take that to the Lord beforehand.
Because He'll be able to show you if it's an idol or a desire. I think a lot of
Right.
things that we
Yes.
call desires are really idols for
Yes.
us. You know, they're not
Yes.
actually like a desire. It's more so like,
Yes.
Lord, if I don't get this, I ain't gonna make it.
Right.
You got to investigate. You have to investigate your motives regarding your
Yeah.
desires.
Yeah.
Like, why do you want that thing?
Right.
You know, sometimes we want things because we see other people with it. Sometimes we want things because how people will look at us if we have it.
Yeah.
And so we have to investigate those things. So a lot of times our motives are just completely selfish desires.
Yeah.
Completely
True.
selfish. When your desires are selfless, that's when they belong to God. And that's when they align with what He wants. And what you said a minute ago about submission, you got to think about what true submission is. And Foe said this. He said a lot of us, we submit to God as our Savior, but we don't submit to Him as our Lord.
Big
And
difference.
there's a huge difference. Like, we'll go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to follow God. He's my Savior. Without Him, I'm nothing. And we'll agree to that, but you won't let Him be your Lord.
Tell you
And-
what to do.
Yeah, we won't let
Mhm.
Him dictate the way we're supposed to live our lives. We want to still do, I know you say we're supposed to do this, God, but
Right.
Jarrell feel like going over here to this club and doing some, God knows
Right.
what. So we have to make sure that when we're submitting to the right things and completely. You can't halfway submit.
Or even even more like maybe a little more great example would be like, I have this plan for my life, and the Lord's like, no, but Lord, like, this plan is not like nothing crazy. Like, Lord, I want to be an investment banker.
Man.
The Lord's like, no, but Lord, there's nothing wrong being an investment banker, right? I'm gonna go do it. The Lord's told you no.
He like,
go
you
do
can
it.
start this cleaning company like I told you to and invest your money
But-
Right.
in
but-
stocks.
and that and to
That's
even
real.
take that to to kind of bring it back to prosperity. A lot of us think that because we're obedient to the Lord, that will take us to like this new
New
level.
level, yeah.
It'll enrich our territory.
It will,
It
just
will, just
not on
not
the
the way,
physical.
just not the way we think it will. And sometimes it could, right?
It could.
Sometimes it
So-
could.
It
but
could.
but like I think like, and I know she's gonna come back.
I
with
gotta
the,
ask.
I
Oh,
know,
God.
I just
but
gotta
but
ask.
here's my
We're
thing.
gonna end on Whitney's question.
I think like when you do that, when you submit to the Lord, like a lot of times you'll get what you want. It just won't look the way you thought it would.
It'll be in a better package.
It'll be
Better
it'll be
package.
completely different.
Go ahead with
So what does all of this say about predestination?
We
Because
Oh,
can't
gotta-
do it.
we
We
gotta
can't
do
do
it.
it.
We
We
gotta
have
do it
to
every
go.
episode,
We
dog.
have to go.
Because
will
look,
not have it.
I'm gonna go ahead and break out the tulips and all that. Dog.
well, because I'm just asking because
That's a
y'all
great
y'all
teaser.
are,
That's a great teaser for a
Creed-
future episode.
predestination.
I swear it ain't no one. It
The
ain't no
elect.
one.
Talking about the
Predestination.
elect.
But now
Are
it
you
seems
chosen
like
or
there
not?
might be a one.
Find out next.
On the next
Next
episode
time,
of
Dragon
Last
Ball.
Pod Separate Z.
Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah,
We'll be
appreciate
punching
that.
like this. For an hour and a
All
half.
right, so y'all go ahead and study up Romans.
Yeah.
And remember, there is a one.
There- oh,
Oh,
God.
okay, childish.
This
All
was
right,
Checks
Jet
and
Li.
Balances. Appreciate you, Fred. Thank you, FK Studios, for hosting us. Appreciate the squad for pulling up, having another in-depth conversation where we just, wallow through the gray areas of life.
Wallow through.
Wallow through the gray areas.
I don't know if we wallowed, but
I don't know.
okay.
That's the word that
No,
came
we
to
got
mind.
money.
So that's what we did.
No, I put in my $5,000 offering.
Okay.
Dang.
Appreciate y'all pulling up, breaking bread, getting fed. We out. Till next time. Peace.
Peace.
We love you.
Y'all thought we was playing? Y'all thought this was for play, huh? Nah, this serious business. Now, ladies and gentlemen, with no further ado, for believers, they're spitting truth up in the stew.
Okay.
Each with different flavors, you can savor, you can chew. Talking life, love, and Christ, just to name a few. Grab a seat at the table, we got a bowl that's just for you.
Okay.
Trey, stay whipping up the work in the kitchen. And Wit, we can't keep up with the heat that she be dishing. And Hype, he had the sight, he was blessed with the vision. And me, I'm in the back, I'll be handling the dishes. I hope you don't mind if I speed it up. Stay at the beat as I beat it up. Serving it cold, you can heat it up. The food is good, you should eat it up. Thank the Lord for redeeming us. For the four of us teaming up. Lifestyle was dirty, he cleaned it up. Gave us the voice, now we speaking up. Told y'all. And that's light work. I had to contain him from giving y'all more. That's light work. Stay tuned.